dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a very special guest, Natalie MacLean. Natalie is not only a wine educator and critic, but also the author of 3 fantastic books about wine. Her latest, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, is a deeply personal and powerful memoir about resilience, reinvention, and the courage to speak your truth in the world of wine and beyond. In this episode, we'll dive into Natalie's journey, the themes of her book, and the challenges of navigating a competitive industry while staying true to yourself. Plus, we'll talk about how her experiences have shaped her perspective on wine, life, and everything in between. While you're listening, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could take 1 minute to subscribe, rate, and review. It only takes a few seconds of your time, but means so much to the show. Also, be sure to check that box for automatic downloads so that new episodes of Exploring the Wine Glass show up in your next up feed. The next best way to support Exploring the Wine Glass is to tell your friends. If you enjoy the podcast, your wine-loving friends will too. Follow me on all the socials, and finally, don't forget to head to the website exploringthewineglass.com to read the blog, sign up for the newsletter, and keep up with all happenings. Slancha! Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Côte d'Aron specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. And I have a repeat visitor that I am always happy to have on the podcast. I don't know what words to say about you, Natalie. It's writer, wine enthusiast, wine educator, just all around amazing person. So thank you for coming on again.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Lori. I'm so glad to be back with you. I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you. And, we share that podcast, addiction. I don't know if that's the right word, or affliction. That's a much better word. Absolutely. Absolutely. But this time we are talking about your new book, Wine Witch on Fire. And I am excited to get down into it. But, we kind of got to do a little rehash of your amazing history in the wine world. And so, honestly, you have been a prominent voice in the wine world for a long, long time. Your passion is always obvious in everything you do. So let's start off with what pressures does that put on you? When you're at the top of the game like you are, it's always like, I got to stay up at the top of the game. So what are these pressures that you feel?
Well, there can be that pressure, although when you get to a certain point, you pick and choose what it is you really want to do. And like you, Lori, I love podcasting. So, that continues to be one of the core things I do with the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. The books are another. And I think what they have in common is this deep connection with other wine lovers. People who listen to podcasts, the stats say at least that they tend to listen to most, if not all, of the episodes. People who get into books, they're committed as well to the reading experience. So I just find that deeply satisfying. Whereas, I still am present on social media. Perhaps, again, this is something we share, but I am not investing a lot of time in it. So the pressure is kind of self-chosen.
Right.
I do prune back as the years go on and just do the things that give me great joy. And what brings it all together, in addition to that connection with other wine lovers is storytelling. So I love finding the winemakers, the sommeliers, um, basically anybody I consider from the island of misfit toys to talk to because they have the most interesting stories. And I think it's through stories we can learn about wine and remember it better than if someone is giving us a dry textbook or just a list of 36 steps to remember when it comes to making champagne. I think we want to be wrapped up in a story. It's like my mother used to put the peas in the mashed potatoes. So the vegetables are the learning, but the mashed potatoes is what we're craving, right? The storytelling, the humor, the adventure, the conversation.
Excellent. I love it. The mashed potatoes and peas. I absolutely love that analogy. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, and I agree, as somebody who has, as I say all the time, a lot of letters after my name that really mean absolutely nothing. Um, I enjoy the aspect of education and learning the new things, but for me, it's a lot easier to remember the education if there's a story behind it or if I'm involved in it somehow versus just reading, well, these AOCs are located in the northern region of blah, 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 blah,
Ah.
something. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, I hear you. And you just mentioned wine education. That is the third thing that gives me joy or passion is teaching online food and wine pairing courses. So, at my site, nataliemaclean.com, I absolutely love connecting with people from around the world and just diving into the whole pleasure of food and wine pairing. No hard, fast rules, but there are things that kind of go together nicely and will increase your enjoyment and your knowledge of wine and food.
right. And because you're involved in it, it sticks in your brain a lot easier. At least for
Exactly.
me. At least for
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
absolutely.
So, being in the wine world for so long, what are some of the changes that you've observed, regarding diversity and inclusion over the years?
There's been, I think, some remarkable and positive shifts in those aspects. I mean, we're all more aware of these issues, whether it was, prompted by the Me Too movement or more recently, Black Lives Matter and so on. The wine industry is certainly not immune. I think there's still a long way to go on all of those fronts. But there has been some real positive changes, like groups supporting various groups within the industry so that people don't feel as alone. Um, Books, I would hazard to say, like mine, or the latest one, Wine Witch on Fire, which I'm sure we'll get to, but that tell stories about what it's really like to be in the industry. Again, giving people a sense of, well, not just those who work in the industry, but those who enjoy wine, that these issues are everywhere. And it's only when we talk about them, share them, that I think, we can make any progress on them.
And I'm so happy that it's happening because I think that for me personally, wine is about inclusion. The passion that I have for wine, I want to share it with everyone. I'm not concerned, where you are or what you look like or, how you're dressed or anything like that. If you want to learn about wine, then I'm happy to help you find your path into wine. And it's nice that we're getting more and more inclusion of I don't want to say the word allowing because that's horrible. That's a horrible word of accepting or nurturing to bring more people into our community.
Yeah, I mean, inclusion, it may be a buzzword, but it is central to what wine is. Because for me, wine, probably like you, Lori, wine is not just alcohol. It's conversation, it's culture, and it's communion,
Mhm.
literally bringing people together in the best sense. And so that does mean everyone sits at the table and enjoys a glass together.
Right. Exactly. And so you are very involved in this aspect in bringing in wine, becoming accessible to people. So we have the books, the previous books and the new book, which we will get to, but you mentioned your website. So just share a little bit of how you're making wine accessible to all audiences.
I try to find or to meet people where they're at rather than expecting them to come find me. So some people will search the web and find my site. That's great. Others find I have mobile apps for iPhone, iPad, and Android. So they'll find that through the app stores because they're looking for, their pocket sommelier or a barcode scanner or front label optical reader to figure out what wine to buy. Some will get referred to my newsletter from a friend. Others will find the books or the courses. So you're kind of trying to have that whole flywheel of communication of, people will find you in different places or you will find them, I should say. And then maybe once they come into your world, they might find other things that you do and you develop a closer, deeper relationship. But that's what I try to do, multiple channels of communications from the mobile apps to the podcast to the newsletter to the books, etc.
And they can find all of that stuff if they go to your website. Are there access to all of those opportunities to let them know where else? Because obviously some people will their faces are always in their phones, and other people our faces are into the computer, and so
Mhm.
you have access to all of that on your website.
Absolutely. My site, nataliemaclean.com, is a hub to everything. So it'll give you the links where you can download the apps, which are free. It'll give you the links where you can buy the books on any book retailer, the link to join up the newsletter, it's free as well. So, most of these resources are either free or very low cost.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is gaining traction, it's slow, but gaining traction, is actually just women in the wine world. For the longest time, it was wine was a man's world and it's the good old boys club and all of that. And I think in wine education, and I mean, I hate to say this, but education, what tends to veer towards women are the educators. Not to say that there's not exceptional men educators out there, because there definitely are. It's just another way of showing that it's just, you can't generalize anything. But in the past, career wise, women
Yeah.
were educators. And so in the wine world, I think the wine education kind of is all right, we're okay with women being wine educators, but in the wine world itself, it's still the best female winemaker out there. Well,
Mm. Hmm.
I'm a
Yeah.
winemaker. I'm not I'm a winemaker that happens to be a female, but I'm doing exactly the same things that a male is doing. So we're kind of a little bumpy and weavy and zigzagging in that. But how do you feel women in the wine world have advanced, or what new opportunities are there for females?
Yeah, you're right. So picking up on your first point, women traditionally have been educators. My mom was a school teacher for 32 years. Her mother, my grandmother, was a school teacher till she left and had 8 children. Because back then the choices were pretty much school teacher, secretary, or nurse. And now, of course, we have so many more opportunities available to us. But you're right, we still get that qualifier of female winemaker. Like we don't say she's the best female doctor. I don't think we're at the same point in the wine industry thinking we still have to sort of qualify it. But the opportunities have expanded for sure in the wine industry. But we still get things like that scathing 2020 expose in the New York Times about the Court of Master Sommeliers and the whole board resigning or being ousted for sexual harassment. So we have studies that, like industry studies, saying that 89% of women in the hospitality industry, which includes wineries and restaurants, have experienced on the job sexual harassment of some type. So it's still so prevalent. Less than 10% of wineries are owned by women.
Right.
So the senior echelons of management, ownership, still remain very much male, but women are making inroads in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of careers and positions and so on. So, as I say, lots has changed, and lots still needs to change.
Exactly, exactly. And what I find interesting is, North America, very few, as you're saying, female wine owners, winery owners, or whatever. But in Europe, there's a lot more, that 10% is kind of skewed because there's so many more out there that are female owned. And I had done an article a while ago, and I need to review my own article to remember the stats correctly. But where, Italy has a lot of female owned wineries. And like I know in Rias Baixas, it's like 65%
Wow.
are like women winemakers,
Mhm.
and so it's like, we're supposed to be so advanced, but in some ways we're so regressed.
Yeah, and not to undermine the achievements of those women in Europe, but I think there's a lot more familial generation hand down of the winery, and the succession,
Right.
I'm sure is often female. Whereas I think because we have a relatively younger industry in Canada and the US, there's not as much of that yet,
Yeah.
but I think it will come.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I will say in today's world, it seems like the younger generation here doesn't want to follow in their parents' footsteps of owning the winery. I mean, look at how many wineries are being sold
Mm.
because their children don't want to be in this world,
Yeah. It's a lot
it's
of work. It is farming at its heart. It might be fancy up farming, but it's farming. And that's a lot of labor and long hours and the harvest, as you know, Lori. So, yeah, I think, that might be one reason why the younger generation is stepping away. And who knows, the younger generation always wants to separate from what their parents did, so they go in a different direction.
direction.
But
Sometimes often come back.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the circle of life. Maybe it'll
Yes.
be their kids who come back. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's get to the book. This is actually your third book, right? And so,
Yes.
and it is Wine Witch on Fire. So, how does your process of writing change, or does it change from your first book to your second to your third? What
Mm,
has changed? What has stayed the same?
right. Yeah. So, Wine Witch on Fire, and the subtitle is Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, brought to you by all the dismal D's. My publisher said if you add one more D in there, destitution, depression, we can't sell this book. But there is a lot of humor. This is not a book about an angry woman who drinks a lot of wine and owns a lot of cats. So this is different in that it is a memoir, a behind the scenes look of the wine industry, specifically through my eyes, as a person who's been in this industry for 20 years. So it's different in that the first two books, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, a wine-soaked journey from grape to glass was the first book. Unquenchable was the second one, a tipsy search for the world's best bargain bottles. They were first person, very sort of personal, but this is far more personal. And it goes back to 2012, what I call my no good, very bad, terrible vintage, personally and professionally. It started with my husband of 20 years asking for a divorce, and I was blindsided by that. And then it finished in December with a social media meltdown attack, if you will. So it wasn't a great vintage. That said, this is not a downer of a book. As I said, there's lots of humor. But also what a good memoir does, Lori, is that it's not so much what happened to you, it's what you did with it.
Mm.
How did you recover? What are the reflections? Because that's what a reader wants out of a memoir. They might be interested, hopefully they are, in the behind the scenes of what is it really like in the wine world or to be a wine writer, to travel, whatever. But they want to see you go through some sort of transition. In my case, divorce, loneliness, recovering from that, and then the fear of losing your career online or getting attacked, bullied, whatever, online. They want to know, how did you handle that? So they can take some piece of way of that for themselves. So that's kind of in broad strokes how the books are different.
Yeah, I don't think people read books like that to just hear how horrible your life was.
No,
Right?
no one
I
wants a
mean,
misery memoir.
right? Yeah, they want some ability to say this person hit these issues and they conquered these hurdles and came out on top, right? Everybody wants the winner. Everybody wants to be able to say, all right, well, I might not have the same problems that they have, but
Right.
I can take this nugget of wisdom from experience and apply it to my life and deal with it because I know somebody else has.
Exactly. And that's why you need the lens of time. The issues in the book, even though this happened in 2012, the issues are even more relevant today.
Mm.
And, my family said, why are you writing about this? It's so private. Um, and, I took inspiration from the memoirist Glennon Doyle, who said, write from a scar, not an open wound.
Oh,
In other words, after you've healed. And again, my family said, well, you've done the healing, you've done the work, I'm in
why
counseling
are
and
you
so on.
scratching that scab?
Exactly. What are you doing? Um, but I love what poet Sean Doherty said. He said, why bother? Because somewhere, someone has a wound in the exact shape of your words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think when we can name something, a feeling, and then pull back and say, how do we deal with it? That's very powerful and can be very healing. So, I heard stories from other women, not just in the wine industry, but in other industries, military, finance, sport, who are going through similar issues. Again, as you said, the situation wasn't exactly the same, but the issues and the feelings were.
Right. And so that, I mean, that's a powerful inspiration to be able to, those quotes that you said, that's powerful inspiration to be able to do that. But not everybody has the ability to laugh at their own pain, even if it is 12-ish years later, like your family saying, why are you going back over this? While you were writing it, do you feel it was even more um therapeutic to write about it, get it out there? They always say write a letter and
Mhm.
don't mail it, but write a letter. Well, you wrote the letter and you mailed
I
it.
mailed it to the world, yes. Um, well, okay, so writing it was therapeutic, but the book itself cannot be therapy. As a finished product, it has to be way beyond that. Sort of some of the things we've already touched on. It needs to have the reflections and the learning has to be there. It can't be just, I'm working through this mess and because people are like, oh, no, thank you. Um, but writing a memoir, especially if you've had any sort of emotional roller coaster in your life or any sort of trauma, is tough. So they've done scientific studies, and this is in the book as well, of people who've been in a near fatal car crash, and then they take them and they hook their brains up to an MRI, and they do brain scan, and they read the script to them of what happened during that car crash. And the same areas of the brain are lighting up as though they're in the car crash.
Oh,
So when we go through something emotionally, trauma, we're not remembering it. We are actually reliving it. So that is something that, so there's what happened, then reliving it in order to get the richness of detail and the memories and the colorful writing and then the reflections and what did you do with it. That's traumatic too. And you have to work through all of that in the process of writing the book. But by the time you get to the end of the book, after 98 edits, it really has to be a finished product that someone is going to find very deeply satisfying.
And so the actual process, right? When you write, you have an outline. Right. You get
Mhm.
an outline and you're like, okay, but you have to have in your brain somewhere a start point and a finish, an end, the end, right? So
Yes.
what, how did you go through that process of, okay, well, these things all happened. Is it in kind of a sequential order? Because life doesn't really happen sequentially, really.
Right.
Right. So how did you start with that outline? And then I'm always curious with authors, how did you write that first sentence? Because I think that's the most difficult thing to do is to write that first sentence, that first paragraph that just shoots you off the,
Yeah.
the pier.
Absolutely. So, there are many passes in writing a book. And so your first one might be to get all of the events down in chronological order, which would be very boring to read, but you've got to get it sort of organized and know your timeline because multiple things are happening at the same time. And then you think, what is the most interesting place to dive into this story? So if you look at it, writing a book or a memoir shares more techniques with fiction or movies or TV shows than it does with nonfiction. So your wine textbooks, nonfiction. My first two books were storytelling, but they were closer to nonfiction. This is this is closer to fiction in that you've got character development and narrative arc and so on. The events are true, but the techniques are all what you would find in a murder mystery story,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So, a lot of movies will start with the victim being stabbed or something,
Right.
because you start in media res in the middle of things, because you want to hook the reader and then carry them with you. And then you're probably going to back up again and then get to that point again, perhaps in the middle of the book where you started.
Okay.
So that's what I did. Like, what was the inciting incident? What caused this mess? What was the biggest inciting incident? So it wasn't the discussion I had with my husband about the divorce. That was kind of a secondary incident, if you will. But the real one was, just before Christmas, just before going to bed, checking my email one last time and having a Google alert pop up that said, Natalie MacLean, world's best wine writer or content thief. And my heart just dropped to the floor because, as you know, Lori, doctors lose their licenses for,
I couldn't find that in your Apple
hey,
Music.
sorry,
You can ask me to.
don't know why this is,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to turn off my other computer here.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
don't know what you mean by.
I
Siri, I'm gonna
apologize.
turn off my other computer here.
I
How would I
can't
web search for
just turn off. Um, so doctors lose their license for malpractice, lawyers get disbarred for misrepresentation, but writers, we lose our careers for copyright attribution issues. So this wasn't plagiarism, but it was about copyright. And so this just hit me like I was watching an 18-wheeler truck come way down on a long ribbon of highway. And, the words felt like they were coming in and out from the screen. And I just thought, oh my God, what is this?
Wow.
And so I started there and the reaction, and what's happening and how my world is kind of imploding in on me. And then I go from there.
Okay. It's so one of my favorite shows because of my dad is Columbo.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's exactly what that is how every Columbo episode is, right? It starts off with the murder. You already know who the murderer is. You already
Right.
know how the person was murdered. So there's no mystery of that. And then they backtrack to Columbo going through, bumbling basically through and putting the pieces together
Yes.
that you kind of already knew because you watched it at the beginning, but now you're seeing all of the pieces,
How
that
they fit.
jigsaw puzzle come together to fit together to why this person ended up
Yeah.
murdering. So
That's exactly it. I just loved his expression. Was he the one who said, just one more thing? He'd be partway out the door.
yeah.
And
Yes.
then he,
Yeah.
and then he'd
Yeah.
ask something that would be like the tipping point of solving the
Right.
case. But
Yep.
you're right. It should read as fast-paced as a mystery, because it is a mystery. It's like, why is
Why
this
did this
happening?
happen? Right.
Right? Because I'm taking you to that moment where I don't know, even though we all know, I mean, I'm still here, so I survived. Spoiler alert. Um, but then, yes, and then you backtrack. How did this get so bad so quickly?
Right.
And then you start putting all the pieces together. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one that will teach you not to check email before you go to bed.
Yes. Yes, Lori.
And two, I get it because I have the Google alert for Lori Budd also. And,
Yeah.
sometimes it's coming because somebody reached out to you. So there's an article coming out about you or something like that. But that sounds like nobody even reached out to you and you were completely blindsided and you're like, whoa,
Yeah. No,
So,
it was true. And it was interesting because the website, it was a US based website, um, and they had contacted many other writers about me over a 2 week period before they published the article, but they had never reached out
reached
to
out.
me. And, that's neither here nor there, depending on what the issue is. But, the New York Times could never be allowed to do something like that, like in terms of journalistic ethics.
Right.
Um, and one, I do remember on the comments, which snowballed, Patrick Fagan, who was the wine columnist for the Chicago Tribune, said, could this not have been? Oh, he noticed that I had been on the masthead of this website. I had contributed an article or two like years previous, but I hadn't recently. And he said, I noticed she's on the masthead. Could you not have handled this in-house, like contacted her? And the editor just said, we stand by our article. We didn't answer the question, but
Question.
anyway, yeah.
That's the way they do it. Just push foo it under. But
Well,
we
it's
know,
better clickbait, yeah, that way.
yes.
Anyway.
But as you said, we know the ending because you are still here and you are writing about it and in that own way that is your way of responding to them in a much better way,
Well, social media, as you know, Lori, just does not allow for nuance. It is, just this quick, mindless echo chamber of half-truths or whatever.
Right.
And so there was no way, like, I learned pretty quickly that even responding or posting on this blog, all it did was, vent the flames.
Yep.
And I just had to pull back from it completely. And then, of course, I pulled back from the whole situation. I couldn't look at my notes for 5 years. It was just, I just put them away. But yeah, you need the nuances of a longer form narrative to dig into when there's just so many issues involved.
Exactly. Exactly. And now a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website www.dracaenawines.com or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories. And now another thing that your book touches on is actually sexism. So back to what we started off with, sexism in the wine industry. So what do do you think that your book is playing a role in helping that, or, just guiding people through talking about the history of it?
Yeah, I wanted to write it because I'm at a point in my career where I feel that um, I don't have nearly as much to lose by talking about this as younger women would. As you know, there's a very, pun intended, very tight social grapevine. Word gets around, you can easily get ostracized if you're not a quote team player. And I'm not talking about seriously bad behavior that needs to be exposed, but if you don't go along with the norms, and you stick out or you're trying to, if you take up too much space as well as a
Yeah.
woman in the environment, the media environment, the writing environment, the Australians call it tall poppy syndrome. The tall poppy gets cut down.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of all of that. I'm not isolating any one factor, but I felt that I could write this book and, in a sense, help especially younger women in the industry. But I've heard from many who are my peers who were also, still are, afraid to speak out. And they really appreciated, this book and feeling less alone, airing these issues. And, a lot of people who read it, consumers, not those insiders, because it's not just about being inside this industry, were like, I had no idea this kind of thing happened in the wine industry because we have this image of the wine industry as like sunshine verandas and white linen dresses, and we're sipping on our Chardonnay, and life is just all, peachy keen. So but this industry is wonderful. It is about hospitality, and I've met more with kindness than unkindness. This is an isolated example, but it still points to something that's still part of the industry.
And the title, how did we come up with Wine Witch on Fire? And then D D D D D.
Yeah, all the D's. Um, so I've always had a fascination with witches, which kind of like I'm trending now, or my book title is trending because we got Wicked in the theaters, and it's a fabulous movie. Anyway, but my favorite book growing up was The Wizard of Oz, and my mother would read it to me, and I loved that bedtime experience where she'd have the book open and I'd have my little hand on her forearm just trying to absorb the story and her strength. I loved listening to her read the book. And so witches for me have always been not just a fascination, but um, women of power, of skills. So to me, it's not about maybe the Disneyfied image of a witch being green and warty and haggard and whatever. A witch to me is a wise woman who has been through the flames of life and come out on the other side stronger, wiser, fiercer. And I think throughout like the history of witches, just little snippets is they're woven through this book. So for instance, because I'm comparing what's happening on social media to some of the history bits with witches, and I'm not equating the two, by the way. There's horrible things that happened to women in the 17th and 18th century, from torture to death. So we're not doing an equivalency here. But back in colonial Salem, one test to see if a woman was a witch, was that you would throw her into the lake or a body of water, and she'd be all bound. And if she sunk to the bottom, she was not a witch, so she drowned. But if she floated, because witches were believed not to take the sacrament, you would drag her out of the lake and then burn her. So damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Mm.
which is often what happens with social media. If something happens and you try to explain something or respond, it just sends the flames higher. And then if you don't respond, they'll say, she's running away from the issue. And it's like, what do you want me to do here?
Exactly.
Um, but so again, not equating the two. Um, though I should also say that social media isn't as simple as, oh, just turn it off. Don't look at the internet. If you earn your living online, if your social communities are online, you can no more just turn it off than a surgeon can operate outside of a hospital. So we can't over minimize what goes on online. Words have power. Words can define our reality. And we've seen tragically how some people have taken their lives because they were bullied online and other really sad outcomes. So we can't just dismiss social media and online as nothing. They have real physical impact. I developed a heart murmur after this happened or during it,
Uh,
and it's still with me today. So there's a real tangible physical impact.
and so, speaking about that impact, that tangible impact, so to write something like this, it really does expose your vulnerability. And so you were comparing how this book is a different, how closer to that nonfiction, closer to the fiction than the other books are. Was it more difficult, like stressful, and could you do shorter writing sessions because it was bringing out that vulnerability than
Yeah.
when you were
Yep.
doing the other books?
Absolutely. So with this, as I say, I locked away the notes for 5 years. Um, I couldn't look at them. So, and I had no intention of writing about it. But it was only after I kept hearing story after story about women in the wine industry and others that I thought, well, at first I wrote it for my own personal private therapy. And then I thought, well, this could help others. But the writing process, yes. So it was much longer. I mean, it was a 10-year process, whereas the other books were 1 or 2 years. And I sailed through those. I still put a lot of work into them, but it was a more of a continuous process where this was, yeah, it was heavy sledding emotionally. And so, and I did a lot of editing on so many levels. I had to learn how to write a whole new genre with those fictional elements. I was having to do an incredible amount of fact checking and talking with lawyers because of the issues of copyright and others that were in there. Um, and then I just had to make sure that the story hung together as a piece of writing. So there's so many different levels on with this book. Very satisfying in the end. I'll never do it again, but but I'm glad I did it.
Is part of the issue was that because you were talking about things that actually happened to you in your life, you're also talking about other people, your husband, or or ex-husband, I should say, or people who were writing the article, or the people who were uh responding, not even knowing what they're really responding to. Was that an issue of, can I even talk about these people? Or is the names have been changed to save that, was that
Yeah.
enough?
So just changing the names does not protect you from any lawsuit, like all lawsuits. It's one step in many that you need to take. So, so there were two different issues here. I changed all of the names of the people in my life to protect their privacy, and they all received a copy of the book to vet it. Um, but then it came to these social media trolls, and I was quoting what they were saying, to document, to back up the points I was making. And I changed all of their names, thinking, well, we don't need to give them more exposure in my book. But the irony is that the lawyers turned around and said, well, if you're going to quote them,
Now
even if it's
you
from online, you have to use their real names. Otherwise, you're violating their copyright. So it's like, okay. So I used all of their real names, in quoting them, because I finally came to be at peace with that because I believe they deserve full credit for what they did and said. Some of it was just outlandishly sexist, but I did use all of their real names, and that was not my intention at first, and it remained so to the end, even though I did it. So it wasn't about revenge or anything, because no one wants to read about revenge, but to adhere to strict copyright laws, I had to use the real names. So you have to do those sorts of things in a memoir.
Well, I don't see it as I don't see it as a revenge thing. These people, the majority of people who make comments as those comments are made are brave because they're behind a keyboard,
Right.
right?
Keyboard courage.
And yes, and so they're very, I can type whatever I want, even though I don't know who you are and I really don't know what's going on, but I have an opinion.
Right.
And so I'm going to type it. And some people will do anonymous. And then some people
Most.
will put their name out there. And I'm sorry, I believe if you're going to make a comment and you're going to put your name on there, you've already put yourself out into the world.
Mm.
So why not? This is what you feel. This is what you wrote. So
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm going to call you out on it. And you see it, you call, the social media trolls or whatever, you see it all the time. A lot on, the reels or this, whatever they're called on Facebook, they're reels on Instagram. I don't know what they're called on Facebook, whatever, probably the same thing. But
Yeah.
somebody will do something, and I saw a video yesterday of this gentleman who had a little baby, the cutest little baby. The baby was all snugged up. I mean, the scarf, the hat, the ski, outfit. And he wrote, "My baby's first snow angel." And he
Oh.
took the baby and he gently placed it on the snow and kind of moved the baby's arms and moved the baby's legs and went like this with the baby's head. And the baby started crying and put the arms up. Now,
Oh.
in my opinion, it was daddy, pick me up, right? And he picks the baby up, and it's the most adorable snow angel I've ever seen in my life.
Oh.
The criticism that this man got in his comments:
Wow.
"Why did you wake that baby up? My goodness, can't you just wait till the baby's awake? I did this and my baby got got frostbite." Well, maybe your baby wasn't dressed appropriately if your baby got frostbite, but like it just was a
I know.
thousand comments.
Yeah.
And all of those people, I wanted to take my time and go to each person who was saying something negative and go, "Okay, there's no words other than idiot or stupid," or, and
Yeah,
it's so,
people jump to conclusions and they will say things like, well, if that's true, then this is terrible. It's like, well, how about check? Is it true?
right,
Like, but they don't,
right.
because that takes
And
work and
yes,
time.
exactly. It's so much easier just to type, and it's so much easier, well, not easier, but more prevalent to type a negative
Yeah,
comment than
sure.
a positive comment. And so I think you're all right I think that was the exact proper thing to do, is to put their names out there. But I get why you're saying you don't want to give them a spotlight. Now they can say, "Hey, look, she wrote about me in my book." you know
I
um
don't think they like being in the book, but that's all
exactly,
right.
exactly, because now they're being shown to a higher level of what, you can't cure stupid. That's what my husband says all the time.
That's a
So
good
I
saying.
kudos to you for doing that. So I'm glad the copyright law was forcing you to do that.
Yep, I sure learned the ins and outs of copyright right to the end.
Um, so on a positive side, what role, we started with saying that you've been in the wine world for, such a long time, and really an inspiration to many, many people in the industry. So from your side, what role did wine play in your ability to recover from these situations?
Sure. So, the first early part of the year after my husband asked for divorce, And even leading into this social media meltdown, I was using wine as a crutch to cope. And I've been writing about wine for 13, 14 years before that and never had an issue. But it was so easily available. I mean, probably like you, Lori, it's like in my bookshelves, it's down in the kitchen, it's in the basement. The wine is everywhere in here. And so, um, I have this weird differentiation between personal wine and professional wine. Professional is spitting and evaluating. Personal is when I have a glass of wine, swallow, just enjoy and try not to analyze it. So my personal cocktail hour, if you will, was creeping up earlier and earlier in the day. I was drinking more. And, I really had to come to grips with that through a lot of counseling and some embarrassing moments, dinner parties where I didn't remember what I had said, which is just
Oh,
mortifying, especially as a so-called wine expert. So I got help. I knew I needed it and I got it. And, you know, this book, I didn't mean for Wine Witch on Fire to be a self-help book, but people are reading it that way as well, both those in the industry and outside the industry, because I weave through a lot of the techniques that I used as a wine professional to moderate my drinking. How did I cut back without going completely sober? Because that was an option as well, though it would mean walking away from my entire career and something I love.
mm.
Um, I love the whole sensory delight of wine. So, I included tips like, thinking about what was the thought right before the thought that said, I need a drink. And was it about stress or frustration or exhaustion or sadness? And if that was the case, could I do just a 5-second circuit breaker, literally put my hand on my heart and take a deep breath and maybe change my energy by even just going for a 5-minute walk or a bath or anything just to change my situation and my energy. And that was powerful, identifying why did I want that glass of wine? Because if it was just about enjoying a glass of wine with my new partner or with food, well, great.
Yeah.
That's that's a great use of wine. But if it was alleviating something that I wasn't dealing with emotionally, that's something completely different. So that was one of the tips. I've got others if you want me to share them, but people found those really valuable.
That's a big thing. And I think in our lives, you are right. There's wine everywhere. So
Mm.
you're like, okay, but at some point, so I'm the same way. This is a wine I'm writing about. This goes over here. This is a wine that I'm just going to enjoy. That goes over here. And sometimes you sit there and you're like, oh, I'm just going to open this bottle. And then you're like, well, why am I opening this bottle? Do I just want to, sit and relax? Okay. Am I stressed about something? So that's an excellent, statement is just take that 5 minutes, even 2 minutes just
Mm.
to, you know, think to yourself, if I go and take a walk, am I going to alleviate what this alcohol is going to do? So,
Exactly. And, there's been studies, and those of us who are in the hospitality business, wineries, restaurants, and so on, our profession has the highest rate of substance abuse of any
mm,
profession. Easy access, the cloak of respectability. If you've got a glass of wine in your hand at noon, well, she must be researching for
interesting.
an article, right? So it's complete deniability. But that's what makes it really dangerous too. Like, so
Right.
that we have to be very conscious. We came into this industry because we fell in love with wine and its sensory pleasures and the way it connects to all facets of human endeavor. It's intellectually engaging. But we need to stay close to that initial reason we came in. We didn't come in just to get drunk,
Mm,
but it can veer that way if we start misusing wine or anything
exactly.
else for that
True.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when was your official release of Wine Witch on Fire?
So the first release was in 2023. The audiobook just came out 2 months ago. So we now have the paperback, the ebook, Kindle as well, and the audiobook.
Are you the voice?
I am. I had to
Oh.
audition. I said, hey, I can sound like me. I know how to do that. But I really wanted to read this one, even more so than my first two books because it is so personal. And I know, you know, where the crying parts, no, I don't
Right.
cry on the audiobook,
But
but
you know the
I
inflection.
know the inflection, I know the emotion, and then all the wine terms. It's not heavy going on that, but I do know, pronunciations and so on. So it meant a lot to me to be able to read my own memoir.
And have you gotten feedback from out in the world? Is there any feedback that you were shocked to have received?
Yeah, I have had so many emails, direct messages, and even some letters from people who know where I live. And one email struck me. There's been a number, but I've changed the names, of course. But she said, "This is Elaine. I am John's husband. Um, we lost our 21-year-old son during COVID. He took his own life. John started hitting the bottle really hard. He read your book, and I believe that your book is a big reason as to why he's back to his, moderate drinking habits."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it sort of gives
Wow.
me goosebumps to even think
Yeah.
like that. That's worth the whole book alone to me.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah,
That's incredible. That
yeah.
really is.
And some of the best book reviews have been from teetotalers who don't even drink wine. So they just love the story.
Stories.
So I thought, yeah, all right, great.
You've hit the whole market.
Yeah.
See? So there you go. You don't need to be in the wine world or even enjoy wine to enjoy the book.
Exactly. And then the flip is that people who do love wine love how I weave the stories of different wines because I tell the stories of the people behind certain wines and why I was drinking them at certain points. And they love the little histories and that sort of thing. So, book clubs like to use this book. I've got a book club guide as well, but and to try to drink some of the wines that I mentioned throughout the book.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That is really fun.
Yeah.
And so, just as my last question, because we are approaching the hour, if you could give, aspiring authors one piece of advice based on your journey, what would it be?
Mm. Was it Hemingway who said, write drunk, edit sober? Um, I would say write and edit sober, uh, but edit, 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 edit. Just get something down on the page. We touched on this, like where do you begin? Don't worry about, oh my gosh, here's the perfect first sentence to open this essay, article, book. Write the whole thing as you know it. Get all your facts straight. Do the stuff that is very straightforward first, and then start moving the pieces and editing. I'm a much better editor than I am writer. I need something because the blank page or the is just terrifying. So if I've got something to work with, it's much easier. And then, beyond that, I would just try to do like one scene at a time. It's like painting a little tiny picture and saying, okay, what happened here? And you literally think about it as in a scene in a movie. So the door opens. Okay, who's there? How do you feel? Paint us a picture. What are you thinking or what's being said? And then at the end of the scene, the door closes. So you think scene, 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 scene. And that's how you make your writing cinematic, which is how this book has been described, which I love. And you make it propulsive, meaning it has like a forward force that makes you want to keep reading. So that is my best advice for writers.
Oh, well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your wine wisdom and the information about Wine Witch on Fire. And just, thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and share the stories with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Lori. I love chatting with you.
Mm.
And if people are looking for more resources, nataliemaclean.com is my website. I've also got the URL winewitchonfire.com.
There you go.
That will just redirect to my website. And there is a substantial book club guide that people are using, not only if they read the book, but just it's a fun guide, and it has tips on organizing your own informal wine tasting with friends. Couples I found are reading the book together and using this guide because it asks questions about how do you feel about your own relationship with alcohol or marketing wine to women, sort of broader issues that the book touches on.
Oh, well, that sounds amazing. And I love the idea of the book club and doing all of that. I personally have never been part of a book club because I'm one of those people who loves to read, but doesn't want to read when I have to read.
Yeah.
So
You don't like assignments, yes.
yes.
Well, this book club is, or guide is good for even individual readers because you can read it at your own pace too, because it's got lots of other wine stories in it. It's free. And you can ask yourself the questions. So people will just download it for their own use, even if they're not part of a book club.
Wonderful. And again, the website is
NatalieMacLean.com or winewitchonfire.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on. And
Thanks, Lori.
I will speak to you soon.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The lovely barrow low. You are
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt-Butt. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Kevins. Until next week, slancha.
oh, no, never